Letters in the attic. The morning ritual. Evelyn Harper wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic mug and gazed through her kitchen window. The October morning mist clung to the Douglas fir trees that lined Maple Street, their tops disappearing into the gray Seattle sky. At 72, she had perfected her morning routine. Coffee at 6:30, toast with marmalade, and 20 minutes of quiet observation before the neighborhood stirred to life. The retired librarian had lived in this same house for 47 years. She and Harold had bought it when the maple trees were saplings and the neighborhood was full of young families. Now the trees towered over modest homes, their golden leaves carpeting the sidewalks, and most of her original neighbors had either passed away or moved to warmer climates. Evelyn sipped her coffee and watched Mrs. Chun from next door step onto her porch to collect the morning paper. They exchanged their usual wave, a small but reliable comfort in the rhythm of their days. After breakfast, Evelyn pulled on her wool cardigan and stepped outside. The crisp air carried the scent of wood smoke from someone's chimney and the earthy smell of wet leaves. She walked 3 blocks to the public library where she had worked for 35 years, not because she needed books. Her house was already full of them, but because the library's small community garden had become her sanctuary. The garden volunteers were already busy tending the raised beds. Evelyn joined Martha, a spry 80-year-old with dirt permanently embedded under her fingernails. "The dahlias are finally done for the season," Martha said, pulling up the last of the wilted stalks. "But look at those Brussels sprouts. They'll be perfect after the first frost." Evelyn knelt beside her friend, enjoying the familiar ache in her knees as she worked the soil. "I was thinking of planting some winter pansies at home. Something cheerful for the dark months ahead." "Good idea. Color helps chase away the blues," Martha said, then paused. "Speaking of which, when's the last time you cleaned out that attic of yours? I swear it's been calling to me every time I walk past your house." Evelyn laughed. "Harold always said I was a pack rat. I suppose it's time to face the music up there." That afternoon, armed with a cup of tea and her reading glasses, Evelyn climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the single window. Boxes labeled in Harold's careful handwriting lined the walls. Christmas decorations. Tax records 1985 to 1990. Evelyn's teaching materials. In the far corner behind Harold's old golf clubs, she spotted a small wooden box she didn't recognize. The wood was dark with age, and when she lifted it, the hinges creaked in protest. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that crumbled at her touch, were dozens of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Her heart skipped as she recognized the handwriting on the envelopes. Each one was addressed to Miss Evelyn Morris, in flowing script that belonged to a different lifetime. The return address made her sink onto an old chair. James Caldwell, various locations. Jim. She hadn't thought about him in years, though that wasn't entirely true. She had trained herself not to think about him, which was different altogether. Memories unveiled. With trembling fingers, Evelyn untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. The paper was cream-colored and thick, the kind that spoke of care and intention. "Dearest Evelyn, I'm writing this from a small cafe in Spokane, watching the snow fall outside. I've been traveling for 3 weeks now, taking photographs for the railroad company, and every sunset reminds me of the evening we walked around Green Lake. Do you remember how the light caught your hair? I tried to capture it with my camera, but some moments are too perfect for any lens. I miss our conversations about books. I miss the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I miss you. All my love. Jim. P.S. I'm sending a photograph I took of Mount Rainier. The mountain makes me feel small, but thinking of you makes me feel like I could move mountains." Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest. She was 24 again, working her first job at the Ballard Branch Library. Jim had walked in one rainy Tuesday afternoon, looking for books about the Pacific Northwest. He was documenting the region for a railroad company. He'd explained, traveling from town to town with his camera and notebooks. She remembered how his eyes lit up when he talked about capturing the perfect shot, the way morning light hit a waterfall, or how fog rolled over wheat fields. She had recommended every book they had about the area's history and geology. He checked them all out and returned the next week with stories of the places he'd visited. They had spent 6 months together. 6 months of long walks, quiet dinners, and dreams shared under star-filled skies. Jim would show up at the library with wildflowers he'd picked during his travels, and she would save articles from newspapers about photography exhibits in distant cities. But Jim's work required constant travel. He was gone more often than he was home, and when he was home, he talked about the next assignment, the next adventure. Evelyn, raised by practical parents who valued stability above all else, felt herself being pulled into a life of uncertainty. The second letter was postmarked from Portland. "My darling Evelyn, I have wonderful news. The magazine wants to send me to Alaska for 6 months to document the territory before it becomes a state. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Come with me, Evelyn. Marry me and we'll see the world together. I know it's not the conventional life you planned, but think of the adventures we'll have. I'm returning to Seattle next Friday. Please say yes. Forever yours, Jim." Evelyn set the letter down and closed her eyes. She could still see his face when she had said no, the way his smile faded, replaced by confusion and hurt. She had been 25, scared of leaving everything she knew. Harold Morris had just been hired as the head accountant at Boeing, and he had been courting her with quiet persistence. He offered everything Jim couldn't: a steady income, a house with a white picket fence, and a predictable future. She had chosen Harold. They married 8 months later. The weight of choices. Over the next several days, Evelyn read through all 43 letters. Each one painted a picture of Jim's adventures: the northern lights in Alaska, ancient ruins in New Mexico, the changing seasons across the American landscape. His words were filled with wonder and always love for her. The last letter was different. It was shorter, written on hotel stationery from San Francisco. "Dear Evelyn, I received your letter about your engagement to Harold. I won't pretend it doesn't break my heart, but I understand. You need security, and I can only offer uncertainty. I want you to be happy even if it's not with me. You deserve a good life full of love and stability. Harold is a lucky man. I'll always treasure our time together. Please know that you'll be in my thoughts wherever my travels take me. With all my love and best wishes for your future, Jim. P.S. I'm leaving for Europe next month. Perhaps the distance will help us both heal." Evelyn wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. She had never responded to that final letter. The pain had been too great, and she had convinced herself that a clean break was kindest for both of them. She and Harold had built a good life together. Not passionate, perhaps, but comfortable and stable. He had been a kind husband, patient with her moods and supportive of her career. They had tried for children but were never blessed with them. Instead, they had poured their love into their home, their garden, and their quiet routines. When Harold died of a heart attack 5 years ago, Evelyn had grieved deeply but also felt a strange sense of completion. They had given each other 42 years of companionship, and that was no small thing. But now, holding Jim's letters, she wondered about the roads not taken. That evening, Evelyn called her neighbor Martha. "I found something interesting in my attic today," she began, then found herself telling the whole story. Martha listened without judgment, occasionally making small sounds of understanding. "So what are you going to do?" Martha asked when Evelyn finished. "I don't know. It was all so long ago. He might not even be alive. There's only one way to find out," Martha said gently. "The question is, do you want to know?" Chapter 4. Searching for Jim. The next morning, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with Harold's old laptop, a machine she had learned to use after his death, though she still preferred books to screens. With Martha's help, She had learned to search the internet, as her young library volunteers called it. She typed James Caldwell photographer into the search box and held her breath. The results amazed her. Jim had become quite successful. There were articles about his work, gallery exhibitions, and several photography books. His pictures graced the walls of museums and galleries across the country. The boy who had shown her snapshots of Mount Rainier had become an artist. Most importantly, she found a recent article from a Portland newspaper about a photography exhibition called 50 Years of American Landscapes. The article mentioned that James Caldwell, now 75, lived in Astoria, Oregon, where he continued to work despite his advancing age. Astoria, only 2 hours away. Evelyn stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. Jim was alive and he was close. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She spent the rest of the day walking through the neighborhood, trying to sort through her feelings. The maple trees were dropping their leaves in earnest now, creating a golden carpet that crunched under her feet. She waved to the familiar faces, Mrs. Chun tending her roses, young Mr. Peterson washing his car, the Johnson grandchildren playing in their yard. This was her life. This was the choice she had made. Had it been the wrong one? That evening, she called her friend Susan, Harold's sister, who lived in Bellingham. "I always wondered what happened to Jim," Susan said after Evelyn explained the situation. "Harold mentioned him once or twice in the early years. He knew you'd cared for someone before him. He never said anything to me about it. Harold was a wise man. He knew you chose him, and that was enough. But Evelyn, that doesn't mean you can't reach out to an old friend now." Friend? Was that what Jim had been? Or something more significant that she had been too young and scared to recognize? A letter sent. It took Evelyn 3 days to write the letter. She went through countless drafts, crumpling paper and starting over. Too casual, too formal, too presumptuous, too distant. Finally, she settled on something simple. "Dear Jim, I hope this letter finds you well. I recently discovered the box of letters you sent me all those years ago, and I realize I never properly thanked you for sharing your adventures with me. Your words brought such joy to my life, even if I was too young and foolish to appreciate them fully at the time. I learned about your success as a photographer, and I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. The boy who showed me pictures of mountains became the man who shows the world its beauty. I had a good life with Harold. We were married for 42 years before he passed 5 years ago. We were very happy, though I often wondered about the paths I didn't take. I don't know if you remember an old girlfriend from Seattle, but if you do, and if you'd like to catch up, I would enjoy hearing from you. With warm regards and fond memories, Evelyn Harper, formerly Morris. P.S. I still live on Maple Street, though the neighborhood has changed quite a bit. The maple trees you used to admire are now giants." She mailed the letter on a Thursday and spent the following days in a state of nervous energy. She reorganized her bookshelves, planted the winter pansies she had promised herself, and cleaned her house from top to bottom. Martha found her scrubbing the kitchen floor for the 3rd time in a week. "Evelyn, dear, what are you doing?" "Keeping busy," Evelyn replied, wringing out her mop with perhaps more vigor than necessary. "The floor is already spotless. Come sit with me and have some tea." They sat at Evelyn's kitchen table, watching the rain streak down the windows. November had arrived with its typical Pacific Northwest drama. Gray skies and steady drizzle that made the world look soft around the edges. "What if he doesn't write back?" Evelyn asked. "Then you'll know you tried," Martha said. "And what if he does?" That question kept Evelyn awake at night. Chapter 6. An Unexpected Response. The phone rang on a Tuesday evening while Evelyn was reading in her favorite chair. The voice on the other end was deeper than she remembered, roughened by age and years of living, but unmistakably familiar. "Evelyn, this is Jim. Jim Caldwell." Her book slipped from her hands. "Jim, I can't believe it's really you. I got your letter yesterday. I must have read it a dozen times." His voice carried the same warmth she remembered, tinged now with the careful pace of an older man. "I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. I wasn't sure you'd remember me." He laughed, and the sound transported her back 50 years. "Remember you? Evelyn, you were the most important person in my life. I never forgot you." They talked for an hour. Jim told her about his travels, his career, and his life. He had married twice, first to a fellow photographer he'd met in Europe, a brief union that ended in divorce. His second wife, Sarah, had been a gallery owner in Portland. They had been together for 28 years before cancer took her 3 years ago. "We never had children," he said. "Sarah couldn't, and somehow we never got around to adoption. Too busy chasing the next photograph, I suppose. Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. But we had a good life together. She understood the wandering, you know? She'd often come with me on assignments. We saw the world together." Evelyn found herself smiling. "I'm glad you weren't alone all these years." "And you and Harold? You were happy." "Yes," she said, and meant it. "It was a different kind of happiness than what you and I might have had, but it was real. Harold was a good man. I'm glad. I worried about you for years, wondering if I had been selfish to ask you to give up everything for me. You weren't selfish. I was just scared." They talked until nearly 11 o'clock, sharing stories and filling in the decades between them. When they finally said goodbye, Jim asked if he could call again. "I'd like that very much," Evelyn said. Chapter 7: Reconnection. Over the following weeks, Jim called every few days. Their conversations became the highlight of Evelyn's routine. She found herself looking forward to his calls with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. He told her about his current project, a book of photographs documenting the changes along the Oregon coast over the past 50 years. Despite his age, he still went out with his camera several times a week, though he admitted he moved more slowly than he used to. "The light is still magic," he said during one call. "I may be older, but I can still see it." Evelyn shared stories of her retirement, her volunteer work at the library garden, and her quiet life in the neighborhood that had watched her grow old. "Do you ever think about traveling?" Jim asked one evening. "Not really. I've become quite set in my ways, I'm afraid. The farthest I go these days is to the grocery store and the library." "That's a shame. There's still so much beauty in the world." His words made her think. When had she stopped being curious about the world beyond her neighborhood? When had her life become so small? The next day, she surprised herself by driving to the travel section of the local bookstore. She came home with guidebooks to Ireland and Scotland, places she had always wanted to visit but never had the courage to explore. That evening, she called Jim. "I bought some travel books today," she announced. "Really? Where are you thinking of going?" "Oh, I'm not actually going anywhere. I just thought it might be nice to read about other places." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Would you like to see each other? I mean, in person?" Her heart began to race. I don't know. It's been so long." "I know. But I'd like to see the woman who still thinks about planting pansies for color in the dark months. I'd like to meet the person you've become." That night, Evelyn lay awake staring at the ceiling. Meeting Jim in person felt like stepping off a cliff. What if they had nothing in common anymore? What if the magic only existed in their memories and phone conversations? But what if it didn't? Chapter 8: The Meeting. They arranged to meet halfway, at a small cafe in Olympia. Evelyn spent the entire morning getting ready, changing clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress and her good pearl earrings, the ones Harold had given her for their 10th anniversary. The drive to Olympia usually took her 40 minutes, but she arrived an hour early and sat in her car outside the cafe, watching people come and go. She recognized him immediately when he stepped out of a well-worn pickup truck. Jim had aged, of course. His hair was white and thinner than she remembered, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned not to trust his balance entirely. But his eyes were the same, bright and observant, taking in everything around him. He spotted her through the cafe window and smiled. That smile was exactly the same. Evelyn. He took her hands in his when she stood to greet him. His hands were weathered but warm, marked by decades of handling camera equipment and developing photographs. "Hello, Jim." They sat across from each other in a booth by the window, both suddenly shy. The easy conversation they'd shared over the phone felt more complicated in person. "You look wonderful," Jim said finally. "You're very kind, but I know I look like a 72-year-old woman." "You look like Evelyn, only with silver hair and smile lines. I'd recognize you anywhere." They ordered coffee and pie, and gradually the conversation began to flow. Jim showed her photographs on his phone. Images of the Oregon coast, dramatic sunsets, weathered fishing boats. His eye for beauty hadn't dimmed. "I brought you something," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, framed photograph and slid it across the table. It was a picture of Mount Rainier, taken from Paradise Lodge. The mountain rose majestically against a deep blue sky, its glaciers gleaming in the afternoon light. "I took this last month," Jim said. "I thought you might like it." Evelyn studied the photograph. It was beautiful, professional, a work of art. But more than that, it was a bridge between the young man who had once shown her snapshots and the master photographer he had become. "It's beautiful. Thank you. I want you to know," Jim said, his voice growing serious, "I don't have any expectations about this. I'm not trying to recapture something that was never meant to be. I just wanted to see you again." Evelyn looked at this man who had once asked her to change her entire life for him. He seemed more settled now, less driven by restless energy. Age had given him a patience he hadn't possessed as a young man. "I'm glad you called," she said. "I'm glad we found each other again." Chapter 9: New Possibilities. They spent 3 hours at the cafe talking and laughing like old friends. When it came time to leave, Jim walked her to her car. "Would you like to see some of my recent work?" he asked. "I have a small showing at a gallery in Astoria next month. Nothing fancy, just some local pieces. I'd like that very much. It's on a Saturday. You could make a weekend of it if you wanted. Astoria has some lovely bed and breakfasts." The suggestion hung in the air between them. A weekend away. In 50 years of marriage to Harold, Evelyn had rarely traveled alone. The idea was